Now, I would like to warmly welcome the Country Program Manager in Oxfam, Mr. Tilak Karnaratna, to formally welcome you all for giving us the gift of your presence here in this evening.
Honorable Harini Amarasuriya, Member of Parliament, Matthew Whitty, Country Director of ADRA in Sri Lanka, distinguished invitees to the event, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Assisting communities in creating environmental and national development, or ASCEND, is a project funded by the European Union and implemented jointly by ADRA and Oxfam in Sri Lanka. Having started the work in 2018, the project has been focusing on its themes: water, sanitation, health and nutrition, while having gender, environment, and disaster risk reduction as the cross-cutting themes. To date, the project is being implemented in the intended areas, that is 52 communities in 3 districts, Matale, Nuwareli, and Monaragala, covering both rural and estate populations. The purpose of the project is to strengthen communities and public institutions towards an integrated, mutually accountable service delivery system in water, sanitation, health and nutrition, and the health sector at large. Beneficiaries are the women and children from the poor and vulnerable families in those areas. From among the activities in ASCEND project, one is aiming to assess the period poverty and also the causes for it, and also to enable the reduction of period poverty. The project attended to it by getting a research organization, the Advocata Institute, to conduct the study, and also to launch a signature campaign urging the government to reduce the tax on sanitary products for women. The event we are holding here now, today, Tuesday, March 15, 2022, is the launch of that report of the study done by the Advocata Institute, and also this was an activity initiated by that ASCEND project. So on behalf of the organizers, both ADRA and Oxfam, let me warmly welcome our chief guest, Honorable Harini Amarasuriya, Member of Parliament, who have been very active in the development issues since her days in the university, including women and related matters, in the country for a long time, since before becoming a parliamentarian. Let me also welcome the European Union delegation, represented here by Ms. Jenny, Head of Cooperation, and also the other officers from the delegation on behalf of the organizers. Further, I welcome our panelists, Dr. Ashmira Balasuriya, Virai Baltasar, and also Lakmini Jayatilaka, and the moderator Satya Karunaratna, who all have kindly agreed to join this event. Last but not least, I warmly welcome all those invitees for joining this event, including our colleagues from both ADRA and Oxfam. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Karunaratne, for your welcome. And now we have to talk about a little bit of project partnership. I would like to warmly welcome Country Director in ADRA Sri Lanka, Mr. Matthew Whitty, to give a little bit of context on ADRA Sri Lanka and Oxfam partnership.
Good afternoon. I want to thank you for being here, especially our chief guest, Dr. Harini Amarsurya, and dignitaries from European Union, and each of you for being here. And I'm representing ADRA Sri Lanka as a country director. ADRA has been working in Sri Lanka for nearly 40 years, and in the Ascend project have been focusing on water and sanitation, and health and nutrition aspects. We've had the privilege to partner with Oxfam in this project, where they've led in their expertise in gender and disaster risk reduction and community development. The project has been implemented in partnership and with donor funding and support from the European Union, and has worked closely in partnership with various government ministries, including the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Water Supply. We're especially thankful for the opportunity to collaborate, and I want to make special recognition of the hard work of Oxfam and Advocata in conducting the research that's going to be presented today. I know that they've engaged in the participation of many women throughout the rural communities to hear their experiences and then to share the findings of the report back. I know that there's much support and enthusiasm in those communities. So we're happy to share the findings on this national stage, and we hope that the findings contribute to building greater awareness of the issues of period poverty and the steps that can be taken to effectively contribute to improving the lives of women and girls across Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitty, for your speech. And now is the time for Ms. Visakha Wickramaarachi, Project Director of Ascend Project in ADRA Sri Lanka, to speak a little about the Ascend Project as an introduction to the project and the areas of the project covers.
Our chief guest, Honorable Dr. Harini Amarsurya, and all our esteemed guests, a very good afternoon to all. I think today you must have heard words like ADRA, Oxfam, Ascend Project. You must be wondering, who are these people? So let me introduce to you our project and present to you some of our slides of what we do. Okay, let's start. Who we are. We are assisting communities in creating environmental and nutrition development, shortly known as the Ascend Project. I think Mr. Karunaratne and also Matthew Whitty has briefly told that this is a project that is funded by the European Union. This is a special grant to improve the vulnerable communities, especially in central and Uva provinces. This is the objective of our project, to contribute towards the improvement of health, nutrition, hygiene and sanitation of the rural and estate communities in the Uva and Central province. Our outcome reads as to strengthen communities and public institutions towards an integrated, mutually accountable service delivery system in wash and health sector. Let's go to the next slide, please. Our project is working with 3 partners. Our lead applicant is ADRA UK, but here in Sri Lanka, the project is implemented jointly with ADRA Sri Lanka and Oxfam Italy. We have 2 main sectors under our project, which is water, sanitation, and hygiene, and the other one is health and nutrition. Next slide, please. I think we are having a little bit of technical difficulties. Please hold on. Till the slides are ready, let me say that our project is a grant of 5.8 million euros, and it's a project for 57 months, and we work in 3 districts, namely Nuwara district, Matale, and Monoragala. In Nuwara, we work in Ambagamuwa DSD, mainly Horana, Maskaliya, and Bhagavantalawa plantation communities. In Matale, we work in Vilkomuwa DSD division, and in Monoragala, we work in 2 district DS divisions, which is Vellavaya and Buttala. These are the areas that I just mentioned. Let's go to the next slide. And here in Matale and Monoragala. Okay, when it comes to water, sanitation, and hygiene, I have included some key activities that we have accomplished through our project, such as we have constructed 20 gravity-fed water systems, 110 new hand pumps were installed through the project. We have renovated 250 existing hand pumps. We have distributed over 2,000 household water filters, and we have supported the Dikoya hospital with their water needs. When it comes to sanitation, we have constructed 400 latrines. This is for individual households, and 20 job site latrines or restrooms. We have 35 bathing places. We have renovated the drainage system in the Nuwara estate housing. And of course, we have renovated the latrines in 6 wards in the Koya Base Hospital. Of course, given infrastructure is not enough, we have to teach the people how to practice proper hygiene. So we have also included special trainings for children, named as CHAST, and another training for adults we normally call as FAST. These trainings and information management systems and everything was given to these communities. A very notable activity at the very end was menstrual awareness and hygiene information that we shared with the communities. I think Ms. Jayatilaka will be explaining more about this activity. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Let me share with you pictures. I think most of us can relate to pictures more than words. Okay, here is a picture of household water filters. In our project, as always, we always try to give special consideration to the vulnerable families, the elderly, the disabled, and the single-headed households. And we try to support them as much as possible. Next slide. And here are some of the pictures of our improved gravity-fed water system, the pipeline in the tanks. Let's go to the next slide. These are the completed gravity-fed systems. We had the honor of having the EU Ambassador grace our opening ceremony. And here we have Director General, Mr. Raja Gunaratna, who also attended our opening ceremony. Here are some of the pictures assistance that we did for Dikkoya Base Hospital. This is one of the toilets that we have renovated. You can see it's with railings, and this also has a hook on top so you can support yourself. And then we also supported them with constructing a laundry room and water systems. And here are some pictures of our hand pumps. And you'll see Mr. Prema Tilaka from Department of National Community Water Supply, who also came and investigated the work that we are doing. Here, some of the tube wells that we constructed, namely 10, we have connected it with solar power so that schools, vulnerable schools, and some polyclinics will have access to water. We also have supported joint with the government and extend the water pipelines. And here are some of the owner-driven latrines that we have constructed. Very basic, but these latrines have made a world of a difference to this household. And we actually also have reports saying that the incidence of diarrhea has actually come down because of our latrine construction. And here are some pictures of our job site restrooms. This is areas where the estate women can rest, sit down and enjoy their meal, make a cup of tea, and use the facilities of gender-segregated toilets. Here are some of the drainage that we have structured. At the very end, you'll see the before picture, and then you can see the after picture of the drainage constructions. This picture shows the hygiene and sanitation trainings that we did. We have used pictures and stories to encourage children to learn about personal hygiene. We have also used A-level passed young girls and boys. We trained them, made them champions, and send them back to their own communities so they can work as champions for their communities. We have also developed materials on hygiene. You will notice the snake and ladder game. This is very special. This was designed by the project, and the design has been given over to the Health Promotion Bureau. We have also developed this in different sizes, a life-size mat where the kids can actually walk, go up the ladder, come down the snake, and learn about proper hygiene and sanitation practices. Here are some of the pictures of menstrual hygiene awareness. And this is the girl-friendly latrines that we have constructed in selected schools. This latrines is connected with a pad disposable unit. So we hope that with this improvements, with these facilities in the school, the girls will find it much more will find it much easier to manage their menstrual hygiene health. We have also worked with the communities, developed their capacity, so that once the project leaves, they would be able to manage the water system. So we have the capacity building, the trainings, and we also have supported the local government in strengthening their services. Here are some of the pictures of the CBO meetings. And here we are conducting government services awareness meetings where the CBOs will know where to go, what services are available, who can help them once the project is on. So we made the linkage with the existing government services. And here is we developed the GIS map for all our water sources so that the DS office, local DS office, will be able to map and know exactly where the water locations are there and to support their sustenance. When it comes to health and hygiene, the first part is mostly community awareness and trainings. Here we do gardens, cookery classes, and all kinds of health trainings. And the second part of the activity involves developing the local healthcare system, developing the capacity that exists in PHI and MOH staff, PHMs, and also supporting their information management system. Let's look at some of the pictures. And here is pictures of the nutrition gardens that we have established. In this picture, I really like all the two pictures. On the very end, you can see the ladies holding packets of seed. We just gave them seeds and we taught them how to plan for the next generation of plants. But now she has taken it beyond. Now she's packeting seeds so that she can sell, so that the others in the community can also have access to indigenous plants and vegetables. In the middle, you'll find this lady who has used her garden products to actually purchase a hose pipe and other watering system to make the gardens much more better. Okay? Here you can see the community gardens where the children and the parents were involved in establishing the gardens, and then they harvested. And the special thing is they actually got to enjoy what they have produced. And this not only makes the children love growing vegetables and all, but it also helps them supplement their midday meal, because most of these children does not get a nutritious meal, and through this garden system, now they are having access to a good meal at least once per day. Here are some of the other health-related activities we have done, the cooking demonstrations. And we have also reproduced health education materials that are developed by the Health Promotion Bureau. Here are some of the fairs, the medical camps, the youth volleyball matches we organize to promote health and good practices in their communities. We have, as I said, we also developed the local infrastructure and supported their MOID. So here are some of the schools that we have renovated. And this is the polyclinics. We have included disabled access. And very special thing that we can mention is in each of these schools and the polyclinics, we have established a resource corner. Because we found out that most of the time the parents and the children, they wait for their turn. But now they have a place to wait. And this place, Resource Corner, has educational toys, educational books, and other materials where they can avail and learn something new. And our Resource Corner also has a smart TV. And you can see during the COVID time, the estate children were able to continue their studies through our Resource Corners. Here, in Monaragala district, we have supported the hospital systems by giving IT equipment to start their information management system for their OPD unit, so that all information will be digitalized. So now they are trying to bring it up so that all hospitals are digitalized. So we have supported this initiative. And we have conducted gender positive messages. We have helped the Nuwara district in developing a health and nutrition plan for 5 years. And notably, we would like to say that through the project, we have conducted several researches. Today, we are discussing one. But let me introduce to you the other 3 research that we have done under the project. At the very end, we have a study on gender and issues especially faced by Bakmeewewa women. We have named it Health and Life Experiences. And there's another research that we have done on our nutrition home gardens. The gardens were introduced as a supplement for their daily meals, but we also found out that these gardens were able to help them economically and also support them during the COVID period. So we have done an analysis, and you can find that research as well. And we also have done a research on CKDU, chronic kidney disease. Most of the research is done in Sri Lanka is to find the origin of the disease or some kind of a cure. but this is the first time in Sri Lanka where we have done a research from the perspective of the patient. How does the patient feel? What are the issues and things that the patient and the family experience? What are the gaps in their services and what needs to be improved? So all these researches are available in our ADRA website. If you are interested, please visit our website and look at these wonderful researches that we have done. This is just a picture of our CKD Research Symposium we just had last month. It was highly accepted by the central government of Sri Lanka. COVID responses were not part of the project, but facing up to the need, our project has taken up the responsibility to support the needs. And we have developed hand washing station, IC materials, and provided protective equipment for the frontline workers who had to face the initial stages of the pandemic. So these are some of the few things that we have done. But I'm sure you're not here to hear more about the project, but very much excited to know more about what's happening today. So let me conclude my speech and hand it over to Devashri to continue the program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Vikramarachi, for giving us this wonderful introduction on the project. Now we will be playing a small introductory video regarding on the research conducted through ASCENT project and the key findings of the today's study report.
හරි අමාරුවෙන් තමයි ජීවත් වෙන්නේ. එතකොට පෑඩ් එක කියන්නේ ඒකත් අපිට ගොඩක් අර දැනෙන ප්‍රශ්නයක් වෙලා. ඒක ප්‍රශ්නත් එක්ක දැන් මේ පෑඩ් වල මිල අධික හින්දා ගන්න මේ තත්ත්වයක් නැහැ. කියන්නේ සනීප ආරක්ෂක තුවාවල මිල ටිකක් අඩු වෙලා මේ තියෙනවා නම් ගොඩක් හොඳයි.
பேடுண்ட விலைவாசி அதிகமா இருக்கிறதுனால சில நேரம் மலையகத்துல இருக்க பெண்களுக்கு அதை வாங்க கூட சூழ்நிலை இல்லாத ஒரு நிர்பந்தத்துல இருக்காங்க. இப்போ ஒரு வீட்டுல 4 பெண்களும் இருக்கிறாங்க.
දරුවෝ වුණත් පාසල් යන ළමයි පාසල් යන එකත් නතර කරලා ගෙවල් වලට වෙලත් ඉන්නවා. ඒ පෑඩ් අර එහෙම ගන්න බැරි හන්දා.
ஏட்டா இந்த பேட்டை வாங்க முடியல.
මම ඉල්ලන්නේ මේ පෑඩ් වල මිල අඩු කරලා අපිට සහන මිලක් ලබා දෙන්න කියලා.
With that, now is a special time that I would like to invite our keynote speaker and chief guest, Parliament member, Honorable Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, to talk a little bit about overall period poverty in Sri Lanka.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for inviting me to the launch of this important study and for giving me the time to share a few thoughts on a subject that is not usually discussed and often considered inappropriate. Having said that, I think over the last 2-3 years or so, this subject has got quite a bit of attention and people have started talking about it, especially the need to reduce or remove the tax on sanitary napkins and sanitary products. I think at this point, there's absolutely no need for further argument on this issue. even a 52% tax on these products is absurd in my view, and definitely something that we should be campaigning for and advocating seriously, because this is something that is as basic for our needs as any other product that women need, and actually I don't think we need to. There should be no debate, no further debate on this, and this is something that is really well established. So I'm really thankful to Oxfam and ADRA for having addressed this issue, because I think this kind of research then makes the case much easier for people like us to lobby when we have the facts and figures in hand. But today I want to talk about this from a slightly broader perspective, not just about access to sanitary pads or sanitary napkins, but try to locate the problem of period poverty in a slightly broader perspective. I think what this issue tells us is actually reflective of what this issue shows us is the lack of priority that's given to women's health and women's issues in this country, right? It is not just about the lack of access to sanitary products. There are still schools which don't have, as you showed in your presentation, and your work seems to be addressing it, there are still schools that don't have access to proper water and sanitation. There are girls studying in these schools, and there are female teachers in these schools who are seriously impacted by this problem. We have met several young women, both students and teachers, who have told us about how they refrain from drinking water because they don't have adequate toilet facilities, or how during their menstrual cycle they will just simply stay at home. Even when there is water and sanitation, we know that the issue of accepting or acknowledging the fact that girls have periods, girls have to use products during that period, and how to dispose of them is something that is not considered. None of the schools that we went to actually have a way in which the girls can safely dispose of sanitary napkins or change pads during school time. Many of the girls we spoke to and the teachers we spoke to talked about how and I think many of us have done the same thing, simply carry these things home if they can afford to change their pad at all, right? So these are things that are at a most basic level, I think completely unacceptable in today's day and age, that women have to still struggle to have these basic needs met. Most of us who travel long distance know about the problem of adequate toilet facilities along the main roads. We may have fully carpeted roads and wonderful highways, but if you talk to women about what to do when they need to have a toilet stop, I think most of us have gone through the experience of how we have planned our journeys according to toilet stops that we have identified. Right? These are not problems that we should still be talking about in 2022, but unfortunately we seem to be still having to do this. When we talk about women's health and periods or menopause or period or sort of the menstrual cycle, right? I think it's important to acknowledge that it's not only access to pads that is the issue. We know that there is absolutely very little awareness or acknowledgement of the health, medical aspects and the health aspects of this of the menstrual cycle also, right? For instance, many women and girls unnecessarily suffer from pain, from excessive bleeding due to conditions like endometriosis or other conditions linked to the menstrual cycle, because there is no understanding in the health sector that women actually have to deal with these issues and that they need medical support, or that they need services that can attend to these problems, right? I am at the stage of where I can consider myself entering the menopausal stage now, and I can tell you that no one understands that, right? There's absolutely no support for helping women of our age to deal with the conditions of menopause, the psychological aspects of it, the hormonal changes that are taking place in our lives. So the entire menstrual cycle process, which is so integral and so much a part of women's health, is an aspect that is completely underrepresented, and where there's very little support and services for women in the health sector, right? Apart from the menstrual cycle, actually, if you think about it, any kind of health issue dealing with women's health, whether it's breast cancer, cervical cancer, these are always the health issues that have very little research, very little support, very little medical information that is provided. So as a whole, I think the bottom line here seems to be that women's health there's absolutely very little priority for women's health, or the fact that there is very little understanding that women have special needs, have different health concerns, which need to be addressed separately. I think that's the bottom line. So the point here is also, and this is something that we have been talking about for some time now, is that this issue is also to do with, unfortunately, rupees and cents, or dollars, or whatever you want to call it. But it's also to do with the allocation of money, right? Not only for research, but also for services that go towards supporting women, right? If you look at our annual budget, you will very quickly get an idea about how much successive governments have prioritized women and women's issues, let alone women's health, right? There are so many services that are lacking in our country. We talk every day about domestic violence, about the lack of support, legal aid, the lack of shelters for women, lack of shelters for children who are undergoing who are facing child protection issues. We've talked about the fact, for years we've been trying to implement a child protection policy that has been drafted many years ago. But something that I have learned over the last couple of years is that you can develop as good a policy as you want, or you can do as excellent a piece of research as you want. But unless there is money allocated for actually implementing the recommendations of your study, or the recommendations that come out of policies, there is absolutely no use, right? We have excellent policies. We have very good research done on these issues. But what I have found is that the block is always when it comes to implementation. Successive governments, have consistently allocated very little for these kinds of issues, which means that then the state services are really handicapped when it comes to responding to these kinds of needs. So I think what we need to now also do, and this is something that again we need to have a stronger discussion about, is doing some kind of proper analysis of our budgets and about how money is allocated and for what. And highlighting the ways in which women's well-being, not just women's health, women's well-being overall is being compromised because of the way we do our budgets and because of the way we think about how to allocate resources for issues that are important to us. I also want to highlight this idea that this is also a problem that needs to be addressed holistically. Often when we do pieces of research or we do policy work, for the purpose of advocacy, we will pick and choose what we want to highlight. And that's fair enough. When you're doing advocacy campaigns, you often have to cherry pick what you want to work on. But the issues are far more complicated. The issues are interlinked. Our economic policy, our health policy, our gender policies, our education policies are all linked. So unless we have a holistic view about how overall national policy making and how overall national prioritizing affects these issues, I think we sometimes sort of get lost in the details, or we campaign on details without necessarily seeing how one issue links to the other. For instance, unless we have an economy, unless we have economic policies that understand the importance of women's labor, women's work, and how women's labor needs to be reorganized in terms of the unpaid and unpaid care work that they do, our economy will always be conceptualized, leaving out a whole area of work and life that is absolutely essential to us. Unless we acknowledge the contribution of women through unpaid care work, and we recognize that as an absolutely essential component of our economic system, and that we need to have the kinds of services that will make women's unpaid care work a little less complicated through proper healthcare systems, through properly funded education systems, through daycare facilities, proper transport systems, how all of those have an impact on women's, the way in which women struggle to fulfill their unpaid care work, we will not be able to really address the problem holistically, right? So I think it's really important that while we pick on specific issues for advocacy purposes, we also recognize how these different issues are linked to each other. How an economy that does not prioritize women's labor, that does not recognize women's unpaid care work, can never be fair for women, can never prioritize issues such as sanitation and water, right? We need to understand how then our policies on education where education is viewed simply as some kind of site for training, employment training, has a link on attitudes and on cultural processes that position women and girls in a particular way. Unless we are able to bring in a broader understanding of education that looks at education as something that is about preparing a citizen to live in a world that is so full of diversity, so full of complexities. Unless our education systems are designed and understood as about that as much as it is about employment training, we will never be able to have the necessary sexual and health education that is necessary in schools. We will never be able to challenge the kind of gender myths and cultural stereotypes that position women in ways that we know women are positioned in our society. So all of these things are interlinked. Part of it also, I think it's also about the kind of society we want to have for ourselves, right? What kind of society we want to have for ourselves? What kind of relationships do we envision in the society that we aspire to? And how each of these policies are then linked to each other and can contribute to the specific issues that we talk about as well. So while I congratulate you on this really important study and thank you also for highlighting these issues, I would also urge you to look at these policies, to look at these practices, to look at these taxing systems, also taxation systems, as part of our broader vision for society. What kind of a society do we really want, right? How do we generate money for the issues that are necessary, right? How do we prioritize our economic targets, our economic goals in terms of a fairer, kinder, more reasonable world in which the different needs of different members of society are given at least a fairer hearing. So with these words, I will conclude. Thank you again for inviting me for this and for sharing the results of your study. I wish you well and look forward to hearing more about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Dr. Amarasuriya, for that valuable thought that you have shared with us in this evening. And now we have, this time is for the head of the corporation, delegation of European Union to Sri Lanka and Maldives, Mrs. Jenny Correira Nunes, will be joining with us virtually to share with us some thoughts.
And good afternoon. I'm sorry I cannot be with you there physically, but I hope you are able to see and hear me from here. It's a true pleasure to be able to say a few words at this very important event where there's so many distinguished guests and excellencies I know present. I think this event we have today on discussing and launching the study on taxing menstrual hygiene products in Sri Lanka, which is a policy analysis, is extremely important. It's important for women and girls and also for men and for society as a whole. The topic is something that is not new. It's something that women have had to bear with for as long as we know, and it's never too late to try and address the issues at stake. And this particular project, implemented by ADRA and Oxfam in the framework of EU's rural development support to Uva and Central Province, has helped to improve access to safe drinking water and sanitation and better health and hygiene for vulnerable communities and for women and girls in particular. And as mentioned by previous speakers, today's event is part of a broader effort to raise awareness about and contribute to address period poverty among girls and women in Sri Lanka. And we understand that this is the first time, actually, that we have had a study focusing specifically on the cost of menstrual hygiene products and the impact it has on girls and women. Managing their periods is a challenge for many women due to lack of access to sanitary products, toilets, disposal facilities, enduring pain and being bullied or being restricted from activities and from going to different places. And many women and girls cannot consistently afford the monthly cost of disposable products and revert to less hygienic solutions when facing cash constraints. And this clearly has an impact on their health and their nutritional status. And the solution that is normally advocated with regards to this is for menstrual products to be made affordable. For example, by removing or reducing taxes, or providing this free of charge in schools and through food banks. Anecdotal evidence of provision of free and subsidized products is positive. However, continuity and sustainability is a challenge. It's great when we have a project like we have now with ADRA and Oxfam, but what do we do when that project's finished? And that's why we need to look much more at the policy level. And we must also look at the possibility of rolling out reusable products. So this is also an alternative, and they can be more economical, practical, and also environmentally sustainable than disposable products. And today's discussion, I know, has and will address many of those issues. And we hope by raising awareness, both among politicians, policymakers, and communities, women, girls, men, boys, we will reduce the stigma around this subject. which is part of our lives, and jointly to find solutions that allow women and girls to live their daily lives with quality, without shame, and knowing that the periods will not hinder them in their daily life, and that they can achieve what they want without having this discrimination every month. And for this, we are very pleased to partner with the government of Sri Lanka, and especially the State Minister, Honourable Shian Simasinghe, and the other members of Parliament in this important initiative. And I would like to thank very much our partners, ADVA and Oxfam, for launching this initiative and for inviting me here today. And I wish this policy advocacy every success and to achieve the ultimate goal of reducing poverty, period poverty in Sri Lanka. So thank you very much, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
I should say thank you for Ms. Jenny Correa for the insightful view and joining with us virtually. And now we have prepared a video of study findings of this event.
ලෝකයේ සිටින සියලුම කාන්තාවන් වැඩිවියට පත් වූ දා සිටම මේ භාවිතා කරන ප්‍රධානම අමුද්‍රව්‍යයක් තමයි සනීප ආරක්ෂක තුවාල කියන්නේ. ඔවුන් ගොඩාක් දුරට නැඹුරු වී තිබෙන්නේ රෙදි කඩකින් සනීප ආරක්ෂක කටයුතු කර ගැනීමටයි. ඒකට ප්‍රධානම ප්‍රශ්නය වෙලා තියෙන්නේ ආර්ථික ප්‍රශ්න තමයි. මිල අඩුවෙන් නිසි ආකාරයට සනීප ආරක්ෂක තුවාය අපහට නිෂ්පාදනය කර ලබා දුන්නොත් ඉදිරියේදී අපි සියලු දෙනාටම ආර්ථික දුෂ්කරතා මෙන්ම ලිංගික රෝගවලින්ද ආරක්ෂා වීමට පුළුවන්.
Well, now I would like to invite Mrs. Lakmini Jayatilaka, Gender Coordinator of Oxfam in Sri Lanka, to give us a brief description of the project activities that address period poverty in Sri Lanka, and also to share some of the key findings of the study report that we are presenting today.
I apologize for my height. Okay, I'm visible. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lakmini Jaitilaka. I work as the gender focal for the ASEN project. So when we say period poverty or osab dindutavaya, I practice this in Tamil, I can't say it right now. We often receive it with a lot of ambiguity and with a lot of preconceived notions that somehow this is a Western concept and our women historically have always managed it, so why are we talking about it now? When in reality, the situation is that it is very much a real problem and it affects over 52% of the population. So from the inception of the ASEN project, I'm sure you heard, we are a project that focuses mainly on water, sanitation and hygiene. You can't talk about water, sanitation and hygiene if you're not going to talk about menstruation and menstrual health. Hence, the project decided before we actually start implementing anything, we need to study the ground realities and know what exactly is happening in the communities that we work in, because the ASEN project specifically works in the rural and in the estate sector. Sorry, can I have the slides if that's possible? Oh, brilliant. Okay. So in terms of doing a series of assessments and studies to kind of identify what exactly period poverty was, we understood through our research that period poverty comes in 3 layers. The first layer being the lack of education and awareness in relation to basic sexual reproductive health. This includes menstruation. And of course, as Dr. Amarasuriya pointed out as well, the lack of infrastructure that supports active participation of women and girls in both the workplace and in schools. And of course, the reason we're here today, the lack of access to cost-effective menstrual hygiene products overall in the country. So we did a study in 2019 in the estate sector to find out about education about menstrual hygiene. And something that was very interesting to us was only 20% of girls learned about menstruation in schools. 68.8% of girls actually learned it from their mothers. And so we asked the mothers about menstruation if they knew the basic things such as the menstrual cycle and things like that. And you'd be, we were actually very saddened to find out that the level of awareness that the mums had were also very low, and it was also very much surrounded by a lot of cultural norms and myths surrounding menstruation. And then we asked the girls, so we also wanted to find out how many of them actually knew about menstruation before they got it. We found out that 53.7% of girls actually only found out about menstruation once they got it for the first time. And then we asked them, what did you feel when you got menstruation for the first time? 78.4% said that the first thing they felt when they got their menstruation was fear. And this goes to show how much we actually focus on menstrual education and basic sexual reproductive health, especially those related to women and girls. So of course, understanding that this is a huge problem in the communities that we work with, the ASEN project decided we need to do awareness and educational programs, and this shouldn't just be at school level. Clearly the mums and the fathers and the community doesn't know about this as well. So through series of awareness programs, educational material, leaflets, booklets, all these kind of fun things that we could use as well to make it as educational as possible, we conducted series of education and awareness programs with the collaborating with the MOHs of the locality to do these programs in schools, with the community, with the government officials and health sector staff as well. And then of course going into infrastructure, the lack of basic support for women and girls in the workplace plays a significant impact on the high levels of absenteeism that we find in both the schools and in the workplace. This includes the lack of latrines, disposal facilities, hand washing units, secure bathing places, especially in the estate sector. I mean, Sri Lanka for the past 2 decades and counting still has less than 35% of women in the formal economy. And one of the reasons for this is the fact that we don't create a conducive environment for women especially to come into the formal sector. Understanding this, of course, ASN project is also constructed, like we've mentioned, I think Visaka mentioned previously as well. We've constructed incinerator units. These are basically pad disposal units in schools. We've constructed job site restrooms for women in the estate sector, because something we found out was women in the estate sector, especially in the Ambagamba division that we work in, they travel between 5 to 8 kilometers daily to their place of work. And when they travel 5 to 8 kilometers, taking X number of hours or time, they do not have latrine facilities, they don't have a place to relax, to eat, none of that. So something we realized was that they need the need for a segregated latrine and a common area for them to actually sit down, put their bags down and drink a glass of water was essential. So these job site restrooms were actually something that we created in order to kind of address that issue as well. And of course, constructing bathing places, segregated bathing places that were secluded in the estate sector, because something we found out was because there weren't secluded, secure bathing places, women and girls were very reluctant when they had to wash cloth that was stained. And there's a lot of myths surrounding that as well. And of course, the reason we're here today, the fact that we currently do not have affordable menstrual hygiene products in Sri Lanka. So we did a study in 2019 to understand what women use, to see are they using cloth, are they using sanitary napkins. Our findings showed that 70% of women and girls use sanitary napkins throughout their menstruation. 18% switched between the two, and 12% only used cloth throughout their menstrual cycle. Now, there are reasons for this high usage of sanitary napkins. One is, of course, the fear of leakage, especially with schoolgirls with the white uniform. They're very afraid. So therefore, sanitary napkins are the one thing that they do go for. And of course, convenience and aggressive marketing by a lot of private sector companies that promote this so excessively that they think that this is the right thing to do, which we're not saying is wrong, but it is the right of a woman to choose what she wants to use, as long as it's hygienic. The problem there is not the fact that women use sanitary napkins, but the problem is because it's so expensive, they wear the same napkin for a prolonged period of time, predisposing them to other health-related issues, bacterial and fungal infection, or all other health-related issues. Therefore, we tried to actually manufacture sanitary pads through our project. So we tried to do low-cost sanitary pads through the project, and something we realized was the taxation was so high that we couldn't even manufacture pads for the same cost that it is right now available in the market. So there was no point in manufacturing. And we realized that the reason for this is not anything but to do with the fact that taxation on something so basic as sanitary napkins was so high, currently 52%. So we did this study in collaboration with Advocata to understand what was the cost of period poverty in Sri Lanka. And something that this study did bring out is the fact that period poverty in Sri Lanka is currently 50%. And we're currently taxed 52% on all menstrual hygiene products, including pads and tampons. And the state currently makes only 0.005% in total revenue, which is ridiculously small in comparison to the amount of disadvantages that the government does face. Because let's face it, because of this high level of taxation and the unaffordability of this very basic product, there is high absenteeism that revolves around, especially in schools. So if we can make it affordable, this reduces the number of absenteeism in schools and also kind of creates that conducive environment for women and girls, especially women, to come into the formal economy. Thus, the project used evidence-based approach to convince policymakers, private sector and stakeholders, including the general public, on the importance of making menstrual hygiene products more accessible to women. We wanted to provide tangible evidence to substantiate the claims of period poverty is very real and present in Sri Lanka and is a problem that currently affects over 5 million women and girls. Through the campaign, we decided to disseminate research findings to create public discourse and parallel policy discourse to influence the current taxation on menstrual products. We gathered over 5,000 signatures from across the country urging the government to repeal this tax. Presenting these findings would not have been possible if I couldn't convey my gratitude to the support extended in solidarity by the CBOs, the women's groups, the water management committees, the health and nutrition committees, in ensuring that we captured the ground realities to its highest level of accuracy. No change, no policy change can be achieved alone. I hope the successes of the findings of this research translate into much needed policy level changes that will be built on the backs of collective support and true feminist solidarity as a collective of individuals, organizations, journalists, activists, and researchers to take the researchers. You all taking the effort to be here today, to be part of this milestone, speaks volumes of your commitment to the cause. And I truly thank you, because I think this is a discourse that we shouldn't just end here, but continue to do so until not just the taxation goes down, but till we make this, till we make menstruation and sexual reproductive health one of the most normal things to be spoken about, because it is. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Jayatilaka, for your presentation. And now we are heading over to, we have actually the finalized report of the study, and we would like to present it to our chief guest, Honorable Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, with the hope that it will lead to policy change to reduce period poverty in Sri Lanka. And I would like to request Mr. Tilak Karnaratna, Country Program Manager of Oxfam, and Mr. Matthew Whitty, Country Director of Address Sri Lanka, to come forward to hand over the study report to Dr. Harini. Thank you very much, everyone. And now we will move to one of the main items of this evening, the panel discussion. And to introduce the panel to you all, today we have Ms. Satya Karnaratna as the moderator. She is a research analyst at Advocata and authored the report that we are presenting today, Taxing Menstrual Hygiene Products in Sri Lanka, a Policy Analysis. And I welcome Ms. Satya to come forward. As a panelist, we have Dr. Rashmira Balasuriya. She is a medical doctor currently undergoing her postgraduate training in family medicine under Postgraduate Institute of Medicine in Sri Lanka. She is graduate of King's College, London, and Newcastle University in United Kingdom. She is also the head of mentors at the ARCA Initiative, a grassroots organization which provides tangible and practical support on issues pertaining to sexual and reproductive health in Sri Lanka. Next, I would like to invite Ms. Rai Kelly Balthazar. I'm so sorry. She is a feminist researcher and activist. For over a decade, she has volunteered her time working on projects aimed at social transformation and community building. She is a member of Progressive Women's Collective and Alut Piapat organizations that lobby for political accountability, transparency, and social justice. And also, she is actively involved in community work and drives various community-led projects and groups. She is currently reading for her MA in Women and Gender Studies in University of Colombo. She presently works as a researcher with a focus on gender. She is also an EXCO member of National People's Power. And next we have Ms. Lakmini Jayatilaka. She is a feminist researcher and advocate for women's rights and gender equity. Her research interest includes sexual and reproductive health rights, gender and transitional justice, and gender mainstreaming. She has extensive experience in working with rural and estate communities on issues related to menstrual hygiene, health. Also, she holds Master in Human Rights from University of Colombo, a bachelor's degree in psychology from Missouri University of Science and Technology, and is currently reading her postgraduate studies in Women and Gender Studies from University of Colombo. And now I will give this time to Ms. Satya to commence the panel discussion.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for being present here today. As we all know, as we've been speaking this entire time, Sri Lanka's sanitary napkins and menstrual products are taxed at 52%. And as found by the Advocata Institute via a research report, Sri Lanka's absolute household period poverty rate stands at 50%. So let me kick off the panel with a question to Lakmini, a rather simple but a straightforward question, Lakmini. Given the unaffordability of menstrual products in Sri Lanka, sociologically, why do you think it's important to remove this tax, this 52% tax on menstrual products overall?
Firstly, Satya, I think it's to do with the fact that, something as basic and something that, the one thing that we can't control as human beings is our menstruation. See, when it comes to taxation of other products, like for example, paripu, you can make the choice of not eating something, but you can't make the choice of not menstruating. So I think it's a very basic thing that I think it's unfair that we do tax. And I think as Dr. Harini Amrasuri, I think, pointed out during her speech as well, it's all very connected. It's to do with the fact that we lack gender budgeting overall. And I think it's not to do with one specific government, and I think it's to do as a country. It's the fact that every time we talk about issues related to gender, even especially things like menstruation, there's always, oh, but we're in a crisis, there's an economic crisis, we don't have fuel, we don't have this, we don't have that. And issues related to women always tend to be given kind of the back seat. So there's never a right time to talk about issues related to women. So I think it's eminent that regardless of what context we're in or where we are, we need to speak about this, and we need to advocate to reduce this taxation and create awareness about it, especially in relation to sexual reproductive health, because this also translates into the fact that we don't allow women to have a conducive environment for girls to be in schools and for women to be part of the formal economy. Because we could keep, for how many years have we been talking about the fact that for over 2+ decades, we've had less than 35% of women in the formal economy, and one of the reasons for that being is the fact that we don't have a conducive environment that supports women to go there. And latrine facilities are one of the most basic things, and I think that's something you and anyone in this room, any woman in this room would know how difficult it is, how we plan our journeys, our day-to-day activities based on what basic latrine facilities are available. So I think it's eminent that we take off, especially things like this that are very insensitive towards one specific group of people in the community. So yeah, my short answer is yes, we need to take off the taxation, and it creates a conducive environment for women and girls if we do.
Thank you very much, Lakshmini, for setting the tone for today's discussion. I'd like to move on to Dr. Rashmira. Now, we know that given the unaffordability of menstrual products, women tend to use things like cloth rags. This makes them vulnerable to urogenital infections and even cervical cancer. Could you walk us through the severe biological consequences of having limited access to menstrual products?
Yes, so Satya, like you said, when there is limited access to menstrual products, there are two things that menstruators do. And one is they either resort to using cloth rags, like you said, but with cloth rags, there is a proper way that you wash them, make sure they're clean, dry them, and then store them to make sure that it's hygienic and that it doesn't get contaminated with pathogens. And most women who use cloth don't really know how to properly wash, dry, and store it. And this leads to an array of reproductive tract infections, mainly bacterial vaginosis and fungal infections that can have implications later on in life as well. The second thing menstruators do when they don't have access is that they buy a very small amount of sanitary pads and then try to make maximum use of it, like Lakshmini said. So when a girl or a woman bleeds, has a period, she has to change her menstrual hygiene product, the pads or the cloth, every 4 to 6 hours depending on the flow of a period. So if you're on a heavy flow day, which is normally at the initial start of your period, you change it every 4 hours. If you have a lighter flow, you change it every 6 hours. What menstruators who don't have access to sanitary products all the time do is that they stretch this out and wear these pads for maybe 12 hours, 16 hours, as long as they can. And what people don't realize is this blood-soaked pad or rag is now a great breeding ground for bacteria and other fungal infections that can lead to major complications later on in life. For instance, cervical cancer is an issue, and when you have fungal and bacterial infections, this actually potentiates the virus that is implicated in causing cervical cancer and leads to these serious reproductive health consequences. So that is the severity of the biological severity that happens when you don't have access to menstrual hygiene products.
Thank you very much, Rashmila. I'd like to move on to Rai. I think Rashmila also touched upon these grim realities faced by women given the lack of access to menstrual products. And as a social activist, we know that you work a lot in the grassroots level with a lot of women who might not necessarily have the much needed access to menstrual products. Could you walk us through these grim realities that these women have faced? I'm sure you've heard many stories, you've seen many of these stories. I think the audience here today will also be delighted to, they would much want to hear these stories. So could you walk us through the grim realities that these women face?
Thanks, Satya, for the question. Unfortunately, it's not very delightful to have to share these stories, to be honest.
For that.
They are quite grim. We're here in Colombo, Galle Face, and in what we would consider an urban space, but not too far from here, just kilometer and a half from here at best. There are many communities right here in Colombo, just around these massive structures that we consider to be the pinnacles of development in our times, and the communities that live alongside those. My work really is, I guess, can be considered in two different areas. One is that the work that I do as a researcher, and the other is the work that we do with Harini through the Progressive Women's Collective also. And so two different kinds of experiences, because one is in urban Colombo and the other in more rural areas going into schools. But even though the stories are very different, there is the thing that really binds these stories is the fact that there's such little structural support in wherever you go, right? So just here in Colombo, like I said, in some of the underserved communities, in terms of toilets, in terms of access. So again, we're talking not just about access to pads, but the larger story on them not having access to be able to, even if it's cloth, and Dr. Rashmina already kind of spelled this out, not being comfortable, even if they wear cloth, to be able to dispose of it, right? Not to wash it, because you are living in such a small space. You don't have you don't have garden space, you have no ready valor, or no like cloth rack or anything that you can leave it out on. And so you're really conscious about, who gets to see you. Will your neighbors know that you're menstruating? And so they tend to dry out these cloths inside their homes, under something, and therefore again that becomes really problematic, and a lot of women are prone to infections, which has already been said. I feel like I might be saying a lot of things that have already been said today, and I might be apologizing multiple times for it. But the realities are, I think, we've talked a lot about structural problems and about some other things, but for me, really, the biggest learning experience for me has been people's understanding of women's bodies or girls' bodies, our own understandings of it, right? Here again in Colombo, where we've been to schools that has in some sense a more progressive approach to sexual education perhaps, but even we know in our schools how quickly those pages were turned when it came to reproductive health, right? So in a school that we visited just yesterday, when we went to open a toilet, I mean not open a toilet, but we went to see the toilet that had been built, and they were making official ceremony of it, which we also declined, but going to see this space, right? And it was a big school, but big buildings, no facilities for the teachers, and one of the things that we requested, because we understand this conversation on period poverty really isn't only about the structural, but about the social, right? So talking to young girls and also teachers and parents, yesterday we didn't have parents, but in another session that I was a part of just last week, again teachers and parents, but talking to them about their bodies, right? And you realize how ashamed we are of our own bodies. Like, and that I think is the most grim reality for us, how ashamed we are. One of the, we talk about various things, but one of the things we talk about, we do a little myth-busting session, right? So one of the things is we go in with myths that are across the globe on periods, which kind of helps them ease into it, and then they think of it as sometimes being a little silly, or not being very factual, like, for instance, in the Philippines, where they'd use menstrual blood on their faces to make them look beautiful, and all the girls would go, "Iya," which is a desired response that you want from them, right? But talking to them about these things and saying, but wait a minute, there are things in Sri Lanka that are also problematic. Things like, what do you think about not bathing during your period? Or things like you're not supposed to exercise. Or things like you shouldn't go buy yourself sanitary napkins, right? A lot of girls are very resistant. They didn't want to ask their fathers. They would never ask their brothers. And they were also resistant to purchase a pack, right? So there's stigma behind purchasing the pack of periods. Purchasing the pack of pads. But, and then of course this notion of kili, which I mean is very much a part of our society, and we can't ignore the fact that girls think that menstrual blood is impure, and it's also a bad omen, bad luck, and so that disallows them from entering religious places. It disallows them from sometimes traveling because their family doesn't want to take them on trips because they have their periods, and sometimes in more dangerous cases where the parents also would then give them medication, right, to make sure that they don't get their period while on this trip. And they do it multiple times during a year. And I think these are over-the-counter medication that they take, and they don't realize the implications of that on the cycle and how it affects the girls. So, I mean, I think the biggest kind of grimmest understanding for us has been how much of this we carry in our lived experiences as women, be it in urban or rural Sri Lanka. And I know it's true for many South Asian homes, but in particular, we really don't understand our own bodies. And so that's where we have to start if we're really talking about, I mean, I know Harini already spoke about the larger picture in terms of the economy and valuing the work of women, an economy that understands women. But I think we're very far away from understanding our own bodies, and that's a real fight going forward.
Thank you very much, Rai. I'd like to apologize for my use of words earlier. These are not delightful stories. These are stories we need to know in order to spread awareness, so my sincere apologies for that. I'd like to move on to Lakmini for the second question, which is that when we speak of reproductive health, we talk about awareness, we talk about access to menstrual products, we talk about availability of infrastructure. Of the work that you do at the Ascend Project and at Oxfam, could you walk us through the importance of these pillars to coexist?
Okay. I think although we're here at a research launch that talks about taxation of menstrual hygiene products, I think it's also eminent that we talk about the fact that, again, this is all very interconnected, that you can't talk about one without talking about the other. And I think something that I want to reiterate is from what I spoke as well, is that to date, in terms of education, when we asked girls what they felt when they first got their period, 78% said fear. Do you understand as to how bad that is? And when we asked how many of them actually learned about menstruation in school, only 20% of them said they learned in school. So this goes to show as to how much, like Rai said, how much myth there is around this, because we do a lot of work, especially in the estate sector, to kind of understand the ground realities of what are the myths that surround this area. Do you know that to date still, certain communities don't allow girls to go into the kitchen when they're menstruating? I mean, you don't allow a woman to be a woman, and it's the most basic thing. You create a lot of shame around something that is the most basic. So I think it's also very important to, while understanding and pushing to make menstrual hygiene products accessible, because women should have the agency to pick and choose what they want, whether it's a tampon, whether it's a pad, whether it's a cloth. While understanding that it's also very important that we push for very basic things, because this is all, again, gender budgeting, where it's all connected, and we're all in this. I mean, to be honest, when we started this project, you have no idea the amount of people that we worked with were unaware of sexual reproductive health. So in certain communities, some of the teachers that were supposed to be put in by the schools to talk about reproductive health were the ones who were most unaware about it. I mean, one of my experiences, I'll tell you, is while working with some of the doctors that we work with, they refuse to talk about sexual reproductive health with men or menstruation with men. So you understand that the kind of, now these are educated persons that you would think would not see this, would see beyond the culture of bounds. But the problem in reality is that no matter where you are, you're still bounded by these preconceived notions, these cultural bounds that kind of don't allow you to talk about the most basic things. And I think while understanding that we need to bring down the cost and all of that, this is all very much interlinked and connected. And as Rai said, even schools in Colombo, I know when we go to schools and talk to girls, how many of them say, Mama me havasata me practice in mara periods. Or who don't come to school, don't go for extra classes during their menstruation because there is no place to change. So, and then we wonder as to why on earth is women's participation in the formal economy for the past 2+ decades only 35%, when we ourselves are not addressing the root causes that, we don't talk about one of the most basic things. All of us in this room again can relate to, even in schools, as to how much lies we are being told. I mean, even having gone to a private school, certain things related to menstruation were not conveyed to us properly. And it's quite sad, and that is the reality. And what we also need to understand is everything is related. I mean, even in terms of women's participation, everything is related. So I think the most important thing we also need to push for is we need gender budgeting. While also talking about all of this, I think gender budgeting brings in this kind of advocacy and everything together. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lakshmi. I think you highlighted this aspect of everything being interconnected, right? So I'd like to move on to Dr. Rashmira. Drawing from that, you spoke about the biological adversities of having limited access to menstrual products. But there is also very much an emotional and psychological aspect to it, right? As a doctor, could you walk us through the severe emotional and psychological adversities of having limited access to menstrual products?
Yeah, so for instance, if there is an important exam coming up, or if there's an important job opportunity or a life-changing opportunity coming up, and we can't attend this for any particular reason, you yourself, you get so disappointed, you get so anxious, so stressed out about it. So you can just imagine if someone has to every month miss out on these opportunities, miss out on after-school activities if you're a school-going girl, miss out on workplace opportunities. It takes a huge emotional toll on yourself. you're anxious, you're stressed, you can have a low mood, be depressed, all because your life is governed by your menstrual cycle, because you don't have access to menstrual hygiene products. If you go to school wearing a cloth, there's a high chance you'll leak. Unfortunately, most girls' schools in Sri Lanka, you have to wear white uniform, so a leak would definitely show on your uniform. Women in the workforce can't go to work, because they're scared of leaks. They don't have places to change their pads when they need to change. And these are all, like Lakshmi said, interconnected. But there's a huge, not just a biological aspect of a lack of access to period products, but there's a huge emotional toll as well.
Moving to Rai now, when we talk about the biological aspect of things, the emotional, psychological, I'm pretty sure going back to this whole aspect of you knowing the real stories of women, could you, drawing from your professional and personal experience, could you tell us, in your opinion, what do you think is the most difficult thing that women have had to face, given the lack of access to menstrual products, given the lack of access to infrastructure, given the lack of access to awareness?
Yeah, I think lack of access to any of what you mentioned, products or infrastructure, can be very, very crippling and can be very debilitating for women and for girls. In a visit last week to another school in Kalutara, usually we chat with the principal or with a teacher. Usually it's a female teacher assigned to us to talk about the problem. So the principal, if he's male, will talk to a female teacher and say, talk to this person. So I said, do women or do girls not come to school, or what do they usually wear? Because it's also good to know if they're wearing cloth or if they're wearing pads. And they said some of the poorest of the schools don't come to school if they don't have. And this is, of course, knowledge that I think now is something that we've discussed today, is something that we've known. So they don't come to school. But also, I think on the parts of some of those mothers, the friction that it creates within a home front. If you're a daily wage worker, you're making 900 rupees a day, you have 3 women in the house, 2 daughters and your wife, or 1 daughter and a wife, and you have these very expensive, sanitary napkins, if you look at the kind of imported higher end brands, or going kind of, to the lower range brands, it's still expensive in a day and age that people are trying to eke out an existence. To burden them, it is a burden, or they see a period as a burden. And I think that's really scary, right? When you're seeing your period as a burden to your family, and I know in certain instances where it causes friction between husband and wife because it's about the economics of your home. I remember during COVID, when kind of in various efforts trying to give relief packs, one of the things that we wanted to do was to find a way to put in this sanitary napkin pad, the pad packs, right? But the fact that I think even the state or the government didn't find it important enough to consider that an essential item. It is the most essential item for us, right? It is incredible. It is as essential as that cake of soap or the 500 grams of parippu. If we have a woman in the home, if the Grama Sevaka knows that there are X number of women in the home, that is something we cannot manage without. And I think those kinds of limitations of the kinds of, I remember someone we sent sanitary napkins to said, my wife was trying to figure out how the 2 girls in the family were going to share this 1 pack, because they had only received 1 pack and they also had no mobility at the time to go out and purchase. So it's those kinds of it is so, like I've said before, it's very much about our lived experiences. So the lack of sanitary napkins alone will cause, various issues, and the lack of infrastructure, Satya, that's entirely, that really does limit even those of us who are quite privileged, who sometimes do travel in our own private vehicles as opposed to public transport. And Harini mentioned this also, but every stop, every bathroom stop is well calculated based on how much you bleed. And we don't have, if you're looking at people who are traveling, I think if you really look back, the amount of women who are able to travel, able to go to work, all of these things are all interconnected. So it is it is quite scary in that sense. I also thought I should add this before I forget, and I know it may not be directly connected with this, but in the way in which we also see ourselves and see our bodies and our periods, one of the things that we've been hearing people talk about, when they talk about the periods, they say, Mama leda vela, I am sick, or sanipa ne. So you're using a negative terminology as it is to talk about your period, right? Very rarely do they use the word menstruation. Menses, they use the term menses. Yesterday I was taught a new word that they use the word date. So I said, good thing you told me date, because I would think date was something else. And they thought it was very funny. I said, Ratin the gediyak wage, like a date, and then they thought it was even funnier. And I said, be very careful when you say, tell people, mata sanipa ne, because then they'll think you have COVID. I said, in this day and age. But it's very, you know, I just thought I will also just share that little nugget of information, because the way in which we see our periods is also perceived as being very, very negative. And I think especially, I just want to add this also, for those who have period-related other kind of concerns or other reproductive health issues like endometriosis or like PCOS, it becomes doubly worse, because you have invisible illnesses that then, you know, when I initially started talking about endo, for instance, I used to think it was just a small number. It was very recently that I learned it was 1 in 10 women globally, and it's the same here. And I think PCOS is 1 in 4 women. That's a lot of women. And if there were as many men who had these illnesses, I'm sure there'll be heaps of money for going into research and funding for it. So access to services is a problem, access to period care, period products, infrastructure, and then for those who have other illnesses that are related to this, I think it's doubly worse, and that's a lot of us. That's a lot of us.
Thank you very much, Rai. We really appreciate your insight, because I think we can realize how many layers are there indeed to these social issues. So thank you very much once again for your insight. I'd like to move on to Lakmini with a similar question. Now, revisiting this whole topic of menstruating schoolgirls, right? I'm aware that you work with a lot of them on the ground and you probably have a lot more insight on it. Could you walk us through the real impact period poverty has on menstruating girls, especially schoolgirls?
Okay. In terms of the impact of menstruating girls, I think it's like Rai said, absenteeism has become the norm to fall to, because one is infrastructure. Like we said, everything is connected. Because of that, that becomes, see, discomfort is something that so what our findings showed was that there were 3 reasons that girls didn't come to school. One was the cost of sanitary napkins. Number 2 was the lack of infrastructure. Third was related to pain. Now, in relation to pain, I understand that there is limited amount of things. I mean, you have painkillers that you can do, but in relation to access to pads and infrastructure are 2 things that we can actually do, that we can actually work on. So, and we saw, especially in the schools that we work in the rural and estate communities, the level of absenteeism is very high, and it's almost normal. Now, for example, in the schools that we worked in, none of the schools had sanitary napkins available in the sick room or in the first aid box in case a girl gets their menstruation. So most of the time what happens is, if she does get her menstruation while in school, she's sent home. So she loses an entire day of school, and then probably doesn't come to school for the next few days, especially if it's related to shame. Now, sometimes if she doesn't know she's bleeding and she's bled and she's been in school, you have to also understand, outside Colombo, majority of the schools are co-ed schools. So the context is rather different than what we do generally find in Colombo. So there's a lot of, there's another layer of shame that gets added, and another layer of like embarrassment that gets added. So when a girl is sent home, it comes with a lot of embarrassment. There's a lot of chitter chatter of and things like that, you know. And of course, especially if a girl has stained, that's a huge, like a, it's really sad to say this, but they find it very embarrassing, and some girls drop out of school because of this. I mean, that is also to do with the fact that we don't educate our boys and girls enough about this, and we don't have this open dialogue about it. Because even at home, so when although we realize that 68% of girls learn about menstruation through their mums, when you ask the moms didn't know what the menstrual cycle was, and that there is a fertility window, and that, you know, how many days is your cycle and things like that. So something we actually did through the project, which is very simple, was, I think everybody would have got this, we did these leaflets on menstrual hygiene. And on the flip side of it, what we did was we put a calendar, just basic, January to December, 1 to 30 days, so that girls can actually start marking their period. Now, something that we also understood is there are midwives that do visit, especially in the rural and estate sector. One thing I'll tell you is, in terms of the midwife services, are brilliant because they visit school, they visit homes. Especially if you're married, if you're pregnant, especially, I think that is your mandate to go and go to these specific households. One thing that they don't realize is, most of the time, because girls don't mark their periods, they don't know if they got their period or not. So most of the time, even with something as basic as PCOS, and which is common in 1 in 4 girls, and now since I talk to a lot of women about PCOS, I feel like everybody I talk to has PCOS. So I'm thinking perhaps it's not 1 in 4, it's probably more like it's more than that. But it's to do with the fact that, again, one of the key things of PCOS, a certain part of PCOS, is irregular menstruation. Now, irregular menstruation could be early identified if you do mark your menstruation. So something that we do initiated through this project is, how do you these are simple things, like how do you start marking your menstrual cycle, because that's never taught in school, because especially with co-ed schools, of course, we have the issue of the hatha potha and sexual reproductive health not being part of the discourse and not being part of the education curriculum. Apart from that, of course, is that even if it is there, teachers tend to skip it. And teachers don't even take girls separately and teach them about menstruation, menstrual hygiene. So when we did these awareness programs, something we found out was that was the first time they had even learned how you need to wash a cloth if you are using cloth, how you need to dry it and things like that. So, I mean, these are things that you don't learn at school, nor do you learn at home, although 68% apparently do learn it from home. So, yeah, I think it's to do with the fact, so these are some of our experiences in the ground, and I think from here forth, and I think everyone here are people who work on the lines of women's rights and period poverty and things like that. And I think it's something for us to take home, that our activism needs to continue and this journey should not end, and that this message that we're trying to take across needs to go on.
Thank you very much, Lakmini. I'd now like to move on to Dr. Rashmira. I mean, we spoke about the psychological impact of this, the biological impact of this, but I'm sure as a medical personnel, you may have come across women and their stories and how really this affects their lives. As a medical personnel, how do you view the sociological impact of this issue?
Yeah, so it's very similar to what Rai and Lakmini have been speaking about. The sociological impact of the lack of access is not just limited to the girls not going to school and the women not going to work, but it has huge implications in society as a whole. You know, they say you educate a girl, you educate a nation. And girls missing, you know, you bleed at least 5 days every single month. Missing even 2 to 3 days, let alone 5 days every single month, is a huge impact on a girl's education, a huge impact on her future. Even for women, their productivity, you know, their jobs can be held at stake if you're missing at least 5 days every single month. So there's a huge social impact. And a while ago, I did a seminar for another organization, and one of the comments from somebody viewing it online was, shouldn't you care about children's education? Is this really important, period poverty? And what they don't realize is, again, it's connected, because period poverty directly affects a girl's education. And I think there's such a lack of awareness in society as a whole, where it's said, oh, this is a woman's problem. This is only, you know, a girl's and woman's problem. It's not a human problem. And it makes it seem as if menstruation is not a basic biological process. So the first way I think we can get rid of this social stigma that has come around menstruation is by removing this tax, this unfair tax on period products. Because when you remove this tax, then period products just become a norm. You know, it's something that anyone can go to the shop and buy. It's not a conversation at home. Can we afford a tin of fish? Can we afford a packet of sanitary napkins? It becomes much more normalized. So as a doctor, I see it all the time. women, I mean, at the hospital, we're lucky that pads are given freely to women who just had children. If you have your period in hospital, there are pads available. But then they don't have that access when they go back home. And sometimes I have given mothers extra pads, like, here, take this home, because I know you won't have access to it and you'll need it because you're going to bleed for a while. So these are huge issues socially that come with the lack of access to menstrual products.
Thank you very much. I think what we can see here is that this is very much a social issue, it's very much a policy issue. So I'd like to revisit this issue of this whole thing being connected to our economy and how this is very much a policy issue, right? So we all know that Sri Lanka has a complicated pad tariff system, and currently there's a 15% general duty on menstrual products, an 8% VAT, a 10% PAL, and a 15% cess. So Rai, I mean, I know this is very much a complicated question, but even if we are to address this issue, if we are to remove this taxation on sanitary napkins, where do you think Sri Lanka should start?
That's a loaded question, only because I also think Harini touched on it at the start by saying that we need to look at it in a more holistic way, right? So taxation shouldn't be there. I think that is something that we can all understand and we can all kind of agree upon, right? And that's something that we will all lobby for. But are we all going to also lobby for those things that are interconnected? Rashmita, you already talked about how education, like with someone asking you, there are more important things than period poverty. Why are we talking about this? We should be focusing on children's education. But if children's education is linked to period poverty, then we should be talking about education. If we're looking at things from like a local government perspective, a lot of the students we've been talking to have been saying, so we say, okay, how do you get rid of your periods? This is just like a process. I'm just trying to show you how these things are interconnected in some very small way, but a tiny example. So asking them, you have your period, you're coming to school, what do you do with your pad? How do you dispose of it? There are you don't dispose of it in school, because the school doesn't have any facility for it to be taken out of, to be managed. They don't have that. And the school, if you talk to the principal, says, yeah, well, the garbage collectors won't come here and take it from here. So we have to find, I know you mentioned, Lakshmi, you mentioned incinerators, right? Which also in some sense is not the most environmentally friendly. Pads, I mean, that's an entirely different conversation when you talk about pads and the environment. So you say, okay, so then you ask the girls, what do you do with it? We wrap it in our bag and we take it home. And Itipas said, then after that, what do you do? So then after that, do you give it to the garbage there? No, the garbage, we don't have garbage collectors who come home. Like the garbage doesn't come into, the garbage collectors don't come into any of their homes because they're not on a main road. So all of their garbage is incinerated, including the pads that the mothers will dig a hole, put it in and light a fire. So you're looking at, like we can talk about access to sanitary napkins, but the local government, I mean even in Colombo, local government authorities aren't willing to pick up your pads and diapers, right? So when you have children or you have elderly dependents who are dependent on diapers, and then you have 52% of the population of women and a fair majority of them menstruating, what do you do with those, how do we support the fact that they need, there were girls who used to put their pads in waterways, which is very dangerous, right? And they used to flush it. And so these then create much larger problems. But because we don't want to address menstruation as a problem, or as a concern, or we don't want to focus on women's health, as an overall system, we are creating much larger problems. Environmental issues, we'll have sanitation issues with our waterways, but we're not willing to address those things, right? So as Harini and as Lakmin, I think all of us in some way have talked about this, how interconnected we are. Education, we only allocate 3% of our entire budget. Health is about 6.6 or 6.8. And so when we're talking about menstruation, we're talking about policy, taxation we can agree upon. Are we also going to then lobby for all of these other areas to also be, to also be taken into account? And I think understanding our periods as not being a luxury, as you have mentioned, in the context of everything else is, I think, our greatest challenge, and that's something we need to look at.
Thank you very much, Rai. I think before we move on to the conclusionary remarks by the panelists, if there are any questions for the panel, it's now your turn to direct your questions at them. We'll be happy to direct the questions to the panelists and answer them. If you have any questions, please do raise your hand and we will provide you with a microphone. All right, given that there are no questions as of now, I think we can move on to the conclusionary remarks of the panel. Lakmini, over to you.
I think in terms of conclusion, what I can say is, I feel like I'm repeating myself because I feel like I'm saying the same things over and over again, but I think we need to start looking at period poverty a lot more holistically and understanding that period poverty is education, infrastructure, and of course lack of access to menstrual hygiene products. And I think whatever activism we do within our own capacities, we need to continue because I think that adds into a larger dialogue. And I think in 2018, when the taxation did come down, that activism did help as well. And I think we need to continue to do that because this doesn't have any party, this doesn't have any politics. This is to do with something that affects majority of the population and over 5 million women and girls in the country. And I think it's eminent that we continue this discussion, this discourse, and work in our own capacities. And I genuinely, I thank in solidarity for everybody who's here joining us physically and virtually amidst everything that's happening in supporting and fighting. I mean, I would say they were fighting, but supporting in this struggle and helping tackle period poverty as an overarching kind of a holistic thing rather than just one aspect, which is taxation. But I think something very important that came out of the study was also we were able to calculate the cost of period poverty, which was 50%, which I think we never knew prior to this study anywhere else, because I don't think that calculation was ever done. And I think something very important that the study did bring out is the fact that it only makes 0.005% of the total revenue, which is actually very small in comparison to the opportunity costs that the government has, that they lose with children not going to school, with women not going to work, because every human resource that doesn't go to school, every girl that doesn't go to school is a cost incurred on the government. And every female not in the, well, I wouldn't say that the formal economy is the only way of making money, but we keep talking about this 35%. So again, we don't create that conducive environment for women to be out there and for women to be part of the formal economy. So I keep reiterating is that we're all interconnected, and I think for us understanding that the state only makes 0.005% of total revenue, and they actually lose out by having this taxation than taking it out. And I think that's what we should be lobbying for. And I really thank in solidarity for everybody who's here and who's been fighting for this cause in their own capacities and as a group altogether. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Lakmini. Rai, any parting thoughts?
No, I mean, I really do believe that we have our work cut out for us. Those in the developmental sector, as researchers, as advocates, as activists. And I think in also some sense, looking at this as someone, I think it would be unfair for me to leave this space without also understanding that I come from a space where I'm also very focused on the environment. So there is this kind of like, how do we work around both of these, you know? So when we go to schools, I often talk about using cloth, and then there's shame attached to using cloth, which I also talk about. I say, I use it, so if you do, please raise your hand and you can use it too. But this is how you use it well. And being able to have these conversations with all of these groups of people, and then really, really pushing it with those who will then take it as policy and then make sure that these are implemented. I think we need people, or we need more women, or this is allies of women, in places of power that can also then make this not just policy, but then to see it through. Because I think those who are generally more empathetic are those who have those lived experiences. Hopefully, that's how we want to see it. So for me, my closing remarks would be, I think that is something that we need to push for, to have more people who understand this and the importance of it, and why it connects with the economy, why it connects with everything that we do, and to be able to make that marriage.
Thank you very much, Rashmira.
Yeah, I think the first thing is that we're so grateful to Lakshmi and a team of researchers, because we finally have a study on period poverty, which is something that was really lacking in Sri Lanka for a long time. So we all just spoke about it, but there was not proper evidence behind it. And I think policymakers now have the evidence. They see the biological, psychological, social impact. They hear about it, they can read about it, and they can hopefully, because we've been advocating for this for a very long time, so hopefully we can see a little bit more change now, and they will realize that there's so much to do, there's so many problems, but period poverty is a huge aspect of a lot of problems. Education, workplace environment, so many problems. So addressing period poverty and taking away this tax will actually improve a lot of other problems.
Thank you very much, Rashmira. I think I'd like to, coming to the conclusion of our panel discussion, I'd like to highlight that, the study done by the Advocate Institute found that Sri Lanka's period poverty rate is approximately at 50%. This means that around half of the households with menstruating women do not report buying sanitary napkins as a part of their household expenditure. So I think this further highlights the importance of removing this 52% tax on sanitary napkins, and we do hope that the study that has been released today will act as a reference document for policymakers and policy implementers to act on this much needed issue and to remove the taxation on sanitary napkins and menstrual products at large. We hope that this panel discussion was insightful, and we do hope that you would have a insightful session throughout. I think we have one more question which we did not have previously. If you want to direct a question at the panel, you can do so now. If you can provide him with a microphone.
Hi, sorry for asking this late. My question is on what is the view on use of menstrual cups or period underwear as opposed to pads. Am I clear?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Oh yeah, sure. So my question is, what is the view on use of menstrual cups and period underwear as opposed to pads, which is more environmentally friendly as well and reusable, and like without promoting pads all the time as well.
I think all of us might have a little bit.
Yeah. So I can just speak a little bit about my experience. So from the ARCA initiative, we do a lot of work in menstrual hygiene and menstrual health. And before, we have our own sanitary pad machine now, and we're trying to produce a low-cost pad. But we first looked at the menstrual cup because it's environment friendly, it's a great option, it's cost effective in the long run. But in Sri Lanka, what we faced was there was a lot of backlash on the whole virginity issue. That's a huge problem in Sri Lanka, especially in rural areas. The fact that you have to insert something, no matter how much you said that virginity is a social construct, it's not going to affect it. There was a huge backlash. We, in fact, went and met, at that time, the Minister of Prisons to because when we heard about the prisoners not having clean water and things like that, to kind of help them get menstrual cups. And we received huge backlash from that ministry as well, saying that people will smuggle things in menstrual cups. So overall, we've had a lot of backlash when it comes to advocating for menstrual cups, even though we've tried to explain how environmental friendly it is, how cost friendly it is in the long run. Virginity has been a huge issue.
I think we have a lot of questions coming in now. That's completely fine.
Nadisha is raising her hand simply because she's also such a huge advocate for the cups.
Nadisha, before you raise your question, I think the other panelists wanted to answer that previous question, right?
Just a
Give
second,
us a few minutes. We'll come
I'm
to
sure
you.
Nadisha will also add on to this, but same kind of experience as someone who's been a huge advocate personally also for the cup. There is a lot of resistance, and when we go to schools in particular, I think we had an internal discussion, how much of this can we really take? Like, don't be mad if you take this, someone's going to be really upset with you if you talk about it. But I think the one that the parents were there, the mothers were there, the way in which we kind of pitch it was, okay, so these are sanitary napkins, this is cloth, these are all options. Then there are these other options which are like cups and discs. And there is a conversation about Kanya Patale or Kanya Bahavaya, virginity. So how do we then, so this is not to say this is right or wrong, but these things exist, and as mothers perhaps you want to look at it, right? And so that was the only approach we could take, and that's an honest answer to you. There was no easy way of pitching it to people who are younger.
Thank you, Rai. Lakshmini, do you wish to?
Sorry, quickly just to add on to that. So we looked at so we knew about tampons and the cups. Insertions are a huge no-no, especially when you work in the estate sector and in the rural communities. But so we tried the option of reusable sanitary pads, and that was an option we really wanted to explore in the estate sector because period poverty was at large there. So when we tried to address this issue in Hatton, because we tried to actually collaborate with a few other organizations and see if we can manufacture reusable sanitary pads, but the problem there is, especially in the hills, is because of the low levels of humidity and the lack of wash facilities. There are no places to wash your pads, and also cultural norms related to you don't wash blood in public places. So what happens is, because of the lack of wash facilities, water facilities, girls and women tend to go later in the night when it's a little darker to these bathing places and water lines, and this creates a whole new layer of protection issues. So this is when we realized, and then we did our study to kind of understand that actually, you know what, no, this is why 70% of girls use sanitary napkins, but the problem with using sanitary napkins is because it's so unaffordable, they stretch the pad as long as they can, predisposing them to other health issues. Sorry, that was my little bit.
Thank you very much, Lakshmini. I think we had a few more questions or other statements from the audience. Nadisha?
Yeah, yes, thank you. So mine is not essentially a question as well. So, but yeah, I've also seen this whole thing where the Kanya Patale, virginity, this and that. But then again, my question was, okay, but what about the married people? You know, maybe, so I feel like the solution again is, when it comes to sustainable alternatives, is to give them options. Yes, like the period cup, the cloth pad, period underwear, all of that as well. But yes, I've also seen, but for some reason, maybe because I don't have an organization as such where I go down to the grassroots and do it. But when I speak to just women, and they're like, oh, what is that? The period cup, they're very interested. Where can I get one of those? You know, and especially even in Sri Lanka, there are no places where period cups are sold even in pharmacies. They're like, okay, where can I get it? Can I get it in a pharmacy? No. But yeah, if we could, little bit of more awareness, a little bit of more accessibility for those cups, even for the people, if the little steps, but even for the people who can have access to it, can afford it too, would be great.
Thank you very much, Kandisha. If you have any more questions or are there any additions to the discussion, we'll be happy to hear from you, or we'll be happy to answer all your questions. All right, given that there are no more questions, I think we can conclude the panel discussion for today. Once again, thank you very much for being present here today. We highly appreciate you being here and you showing your willingness to advocate for this cause. We hope once again that the reform recommendations provided in this study will very much act as a reference document for policymakers and policy implementers. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, Satya, and the panel for giving us food for thought in this evening regarding this study. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have head to our last part of the event. I would like to invite Mr. Mohammed Shafir, Project Manager of ASEAN Project at Oxfam, Sri Lanka.
Honorable Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, Member of Parliament, other distinguished guests, fellow EDRA and Oxfam staffs, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening to you all. As you have witnessed by now, we have reached the ending of the event towards a nation free from poverty, launch of the study report and panel discussion of ASEAN Project funded by European Union and jointly implemented by EDRA and Oxfam in Sri Lanka. On behalf of the event organizers, it's my fervent duty, and I deem it a great honor and privilege to deliver a vote of thanks on this memorable occasion. For over 4 years, the Ascent Project has been working towards reducing period poverty through multiple interventions, and this campaign was one such intervention that we wanted to create both dialogue and contribute to influence a change in taxation imposed on menstrual hygiene products. Our series of community-driven activities, infrastructure development, awareness, and education have all led us to this event. First of all, we would like to thank our chief guest and keynote speaker, Honorable Dr. Harini Amarasuriya, for accepting our invitation and gracing this event and delivering a speech in the midst of your busy schedule. Your presence here today speaks volumes of your commitment to this cause. We thank you in solidarity. The Ascent Project, under which this event was organized, would not have been a reality had the donor European Union was not been there. The Ascent Project thanks the delegation of the European Union to Sri Lanka and the Maldives for that, and also for its head of cooperation, Jenny Koreanunas, program managers Darshini Premaratna and Chandana Hevawasam, even though not here today, but I'm not sure whether Jenny is joined with us through the online streaming. The presence of Rai Balthasar, Dr. Ashmira Balasuriya, and Satya Karunaratna as our panel of experts is greatly valued. We thank you for creating a very rich conversation today and the support extended to us. This event has been the coming together of years of hard work, research, and dedication from multiple stakeholders that work towards a nation free from period poverty. Today has been the outcome of that hard work and would not have been possible without the following people. Mr. Tilak Karunaratna, Country Program Manager of Sri Lanka, Oxfam of Sri Lanka. Mr. Matthew Witty, Country Director of EDRA Sri Lanka. Lakmini Jayatilaka, Florentia Amarasinghe, Visaka Vikramarachi, Anukripema Chandra. District Managers Perumal Shivakan, Sudarshan Velayada Pillai, Rasika Fernando, and all staff team of EDRA and Oxfam in Sri Lanka. Our big thanks to go to the all media outlets, our distinguished guests, and Goldface Hotel for their support. Last but not least, a big thank you to each and everyone, one of you who made it the event physically and join us virtually through our multiple platforms. You are here today because of the great work you do and the passion we share in striving towards a nation free of period poverty. May you find the strength and courage to continue the great work that you do. Thank you all. Also, I have a few announcements. We have the printed final report, full reports that you can collect from the registration counter if anyone interested. And also, we would like to invite for a refreshment. It's arranged behind this hall. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shafir. And I would like to thank you all for being here today. And we immensely value your participation at today's event. And as Mr. Shafir has announced, we have arranged some refreshments for you all. Please join with us. And I would like to say once again thank you and have a good night.